Welcome to the Austin Peay State University Retiree Association's Legacy Project. I'm your host, Joe Filippo. The primary goal of this project is to highlight the work of a person who has been instrumental in the growth and development of students, faculty, and staff at Austin Peay State University. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Carl Stedman, a retiree of Austin Peay State University and an award-winning professor and administrator. Carl, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Let us begin at the beginning, shall we?
Okay.
With your early years. Could you tell us something about your early years, please?
Well, I was born in St. Louis in a house that my dad built on Marquette Avenue, and raised in that same house, stayed in there until I left for college. So I went to elementary school in St. Louis, and during that time I developed certain interests in science. When I got to high school, I had three things that caught my attention on a regular basis: football, baseball, and biology. And that was probably the sequencing of how I ranked them too. But I had a biology teacher that was especially good, and he had been to Concordia University, Chicago as a student, and he was one of the few people that took an interest in what was going to happen to me after high school, and guided me toward that institution, which I finally went to, and started school in Chicago at Concordia University.
So you had, did you have a single moment then when you decided education is for me and I want to be a part of that?
There was never a single moment, no. I've thought about that, and it probably came on in a graduated sort of way. I developed an interest in coaching while I was playing ball, and I think that was one of my great motivations to become a teacher, really, is to eventually wind up coaching somewhere.
It is interesting how sometimes things like coaching can affect one's relation to another discipline.
It really is.
And it did in your...
I had a football coach that was an exceptional person too, who was a good leader and motivator.
That's great. So tell me, why Austin Peay? What was it about Austin Peay that attracted you to it and it to you?
That, I'll tell you, it was a lucky question, or a lucky question that somebody asked me, I guess. When I graduated from college, I heard that they were having recruitment at a certain hotel in Chicago.
Yeah, faculty recruitment was very popular in those days, wasn't it?
In fact, after I became dean, I also went and participated in that, and then I was terminated later. But somebody told me that there was a school from Tennessee that was looking for a science educator, and I had no idea what school they were talking about when I heard that it was Austin Peay. But I went down to the room, and actually there were about 20 floors of the hotel which had recruiters in. So you were going up and down stairs and hoping for an elevator now and then to go from one place to another. I went down and met Bill Ellis and Tom Savage in the room, and Tom Savage talked to me about science education at Austin Peay, and I got interested. I can't remember for sure whether he offered me a job at that point or he offered me a job a little bit later as we talked on the phone.
Was someone especially helpful to you in the early years at Austin Peay as you began to...
Tom held my hand on a number of occasions, and he said one thing that really impressed me a great deal, and I tried to remember even after I became dean. He said, what I tried to do is hire good people and then get out of their way. And I thought about that, and I thought it was a good way to handle things.
It's very good advice, yes.
Yeah. And he certainly helped me get started. I was a one area of instruction. I didn't belong to any department. So I was all by myself, and he gave me a lot of latitude to develop science ed the way I wanted to.
Oh, that's great. Well, obviously they had a lot of confidence and faith in your ability to get the job done.
I appreciated the freedom, that's for sure.
Yes.
And,
I know that while at Austin Peay State University, you wore several hats. Could you tell me just what your development was like, beginning as a teacher, of course, in the classroom?
The first thing that I was, like I said, an area of instruction in science education. My office was in the basement of the library, along with a lot of other new teachers, where they didn't know where to put everybody at that time. And so I had an opportunity to meet a lot of people from the different departments down there and got acquainted. But overall, I worked in science ed and became acquainted with a lot of people in the state that were also interested in science ed. And one of the things that I accomplished was because of that later. The second hat I wore a little bit later was that of chairman of the Department of Ed. When Tom Savage left, they got a new dean, and the new dean put me into the Department of Education. There was one other area of instruction in library science, and they put her also in the Department of Education. I hadn't been there very long when they asked me if I was interested in the chairmanship, and I hadn't thought about administration at all before that time. But I thought, sure, try anything for a while.
But you didn't stop there, did you? I think you had wore additional hats, am I correct?
I became dean in a very short time.
Right.
And I think one of the things that motivated Dr. Riggs to appoint me dean was I had written a grant when I first got in the department to improve teacher education. And it was a federal grant for $1.25 million.
A lot of money back then.
And back then it was a lot of money, you're right. And so that got Dr. Riggs' attention, and I think maybe helped me get the dean's position at that time, since I was a candidate.
Yeah. Are you grateful for any particular experiences that you've had at Austin Peay over the years? That you've had so many different experiences, wearing different hats, engaging in different kinds of activities.
Well, I'm not sure exactly where to start with the answer on that. A particular experience that impressed me a lot, that I was thankful for having, came later and as a dean, when Austin Peay was bringing in professors with expertise in different areas. And they brought in the man who had been a former governor of South Carolina and put him in the College of Business. They didn't give him enough things to do, and Dr. Riggs asked me if I could take the man and give him some opportunities to work on things in education, which was a marvelous opportunity for me. And I've discovered a man that I still have enormous respect for. He was down to earth, common, and yet a very great person who, a few years after he left Austin Peay, became the United States Commissioner of Education under President Clinton. So that opportunity to meet him and pump his brain for 6 months' time, off and on, was a wonderful experience, personal experience.
Absolutely, absolutely.
If I talked about my general opportunities for leadership at Austin Peay and teaching, I'd almost have to divide them into a science ed portion and then a leadership portion.
Yes.
My science ed portion would include working with some men who were interested in science in Tennessee and starting a new organization or a new association in Tennessee. We founded it around 1975, I think. And 20 years later, they called that organization Tennessee Teachers of Science Association. So we started something there to help teachers, essentially, that really grew into something rather potent in time. I was the first secretary and newsletter editor, I guess, of that group. And once it got off the ground, we let other people take care of it, which they did in a very fine way. Shortly after we did that, I was named a fellow in the Academy of Science in Tennessee. And I have to think that maybe that had something to do with it. And some of the people at Austin Peay were also members of that academy. They were full-time scientists. Biologists, physicists, chemists, and so on belonged to the academy. So my opportunity to associate with them was really appreciated through the academy.
Now, all of this led you to other possibilities and other developments too, didn't it?
Right.
If I remember, I think that it even took you to Washington, D.C. At least once.
In terms of the dean's position, many doors opened. And the science area, I'll mention one more thing. Somehow I got nominated to be on the National Science Teachers Association. And I have to feel that maybe starting something here in Tennessee was a reason for that, but I really don't know how I got nominated. But anyway, they elected me to the board of directors, made me the director of research for the science teachers. And in that position, I examined the licensure requirements for all the states, the entire 50 states. And I was really stunned by the variety. Everything from, if you had one course in science, you could teach anything in high school, to another state that required people to have a master's degree in order to teach in that field. Then I was appointed to a committee where we were supposed to make recommendations about what we thought would be appropriate standards for deciding how to develop a licensure program.
So those are some sweeping changes, aren't they?
They were important, and I felt good about being part of it, yeah.
Yes.
The other part that sent me to Washington, D.C. was, well, let me start in Tennessee, and I'll work my way up there, if that's okay. In Tennessee, there are 37 universities and colleges that train teachers. And those 37 have started an association called Tennessee Association of Teacher Education Institutions. And they have a state group. And I became president of that state group. In, I think it was 85 and 86, I served as president of that group. That opened more doors. Being a dean got me to that point, and then serving as their president made other contacts for me. That another organization that trains half the teachers in the country, or the state institutions like Austin Peay. Austin Peay, Memphis State at that time, Middle Tennessee, and so on. If you took all those state schools throughout the nation, they had an association. And that association was the Teacher Education Council of state colleges and universities. And I became president of that group. Then if you took all of the schools that train teachers in the entire country, including land grants in privates, they had a group of deans called the American Association of Colleges of Teacher Ed. And they had a committee that was the most interesting committee I've ever served on. And I was lucky enough to be appointed to that committee. And it was the Government Relations Committee. And we met with legislators over matters of teacher education. And the second year I was on that committee, the committee selected me as chairman. And as chairman and as a committee member, I went to D.C. once a quarter, and we met with Congress people, we met with their staffs, depending on what the issues were in education at that time. And that was a fascinating place to be and group of people to be talking to about.
Yes, with those kinds of opportunities also come responsibilities, and you had plenty of those as you were identified as a leader within each of those groups. Yeah.
Well, it was certainly a variety of honors, I thought, and it motivated me to continue to do the best I possibly could.
Yes.
In whatever it was.
Right.
And I'd have to say that I appreciated it greatly and actually loved doing it. Mm-hmm. So I heard of a lot of people not liking their jobs, but it never occurred to me to not like what I was doing.
Was this among your most satisfying experiences during your career?
I'd have to say yes, it was. There were others that might challenge it a little bit, but
that was
it was so fascinating and so interesting.
Yeah.
One of the last problems, just to give you an illustration, was what kind of people should be taking over preschools in this country. Preschool education was beginning to become common in the state, and there was a lot of variation of opinion about who should be teaching in that kind of an area. There were people that thought anybody who had a high school education ought to be able to teach, and one of the reasons was that a lot of poor people were bringing their kids to that, and they couldn't afford to pay for a teacher that made a big salary. You know, they had to keep the costs down. Somebody else came. It's very vital that those kids that age have the best possible teacher they can have, and they should have at least a master's degree.
Yes, yes.
So what kind of standards do you set? Well, that was one of the last issues we dealt with when I was chairman of the committee.
I do want to ask you, Carl, about honors. I know you have received several honors that suggest your worthiness in so many different ways. Are there any particular honors that are especially meaningful to you?
Certainly. To choose the one that means the most would be difficult, but I was, because of my work with the National Board Standards, and I got Austin Peay and local teachers involved in developing those, I was invited to the White House at the time that Richard Riley, who was on campus and I got to know personally, was Commissioner of Education in the country. And I'm sure he was part of the reason that I was invited to be, they invited, I think, about 200 teachers that had gotten national board certification. They were very interested in this and trying to publicize it in a variety of ways. And so they invited those teachers to the White House, and I was invited at the same time and got to see Dick Riley again, which was a pleasure.
And that is very special, I'm sure.
And Austin Peay gave me what I considered one of the finest compliments that I could get when they gave me the Hawkins Award, which is for scholarship.
That is the highest award for scholarship at Austin Peay.
And it was
the Richard Hawkins Award.
Greatly appreciated.
You have had a wonderful, wonderful career. And I know that despite the fact that you retired, you continue to be associated with the institution. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I was hired on it in post-retirement. For those that may not have heard about that, you taught half-time for half salary in addition to your retirement pay. And so it was attractive in one way, and the most attractive part about all you had to do was teach. You didn't have to worry about committees and all of that sort of thing.
Served as a nice stepping stone toward retirement.
Right, right. A nice
And-
break. And the third year, there were 4 years that you could do it. The third year, they changed the College of Education to a School of Education.
Oh, okay.
And they asked me to come back and be a administrator of that school. So in a way, I was an administrator for half salary for a year, but it taught me two things. One, I enjoyed it and appreciated that opportunity, but it made me think very clearly about whether I wanted to do any more of it. I had heard a long time ago that that you'll know when it's time to quit, and I never had that feeling, but this time I did.
Well, if I can paraphrase Mark Twain, he once said that if you really love your job, you don't have to go to work at any time during your life. And I think that, in fact, applies to Dr. Carl Stedman, esteemed emeritus professor at Austin Peay State University. Carl, thanks so much for
Thank you very
being with
much.
us.
Appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you for watching the program.